Hey everyone, welcome to our Fundy webinar for the month of May. This session is all you need to know about playlists. I'm Tim, I am Foundy's head of advertising and media. We're just gonna give people a few minutes to filter in. So if you could just let us know in the chat where you are tuning in from, that would be awesome. I am tuning in from LA. Jeff, you're in LA as well?
I am here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll do introductions in just a sec. So yeah, hello everyone. Happy Friday. Hey Didier, hey Joe. What's up, Taylor? Ooh, someone from Scotland. Yeah, I love these Friday sessions. We get a lot of people from all over the place. Feels like we get a lot of people sort of, after work hours tuning in Friday night. No better way to spend Friday night than learning about playlists. What's up, Tanner? Hey Maria. Awesome. Yeah, we're just going to give people a few minutes to filter in here, and then we can get started in just a sec. As a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions that you would like us to answer, please ask in the chat during our session. We have a moderator today, Randy from our team, who will be highlighting the questions, and then we can answer them live. If we don't get to them, we're going to try to get to all of them, but we do have a pretty comprehensive list of topics to cover today. So if you don't have a chance to get your question answered, please reach out to one of us and we'll see what we can do. And this webinar will be recorded and shared after this session. If you are following the Founding newsletter, you will be getting a link to the newsletter in, I would say, a couple weeks. So yeah. What's up, Nicholas? Hey, Paul. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Kat. Hi, Donia. Does anybody have any releases out today? I know it's a Friday. Or any releases coming up? Excited to hear about them. Hey, Cameron. Hey, Mikhail. Wow, album coming soon. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a good time. Good time for an album. Get some music on some summer or fall playlists. Feels like it's about that time. It's crazy. It's already almost June. At Foundy, we've just gotten through a big round of festival announcement pushes for various promoters that are setting up ads for their festivals coming in, end of summer, beginning of fall. So we've been really busy over here as well. A couple of really cool festivals, all over the U.S. Some tours, some big tours.
TIAC, DDA, actually. And hi, everybody. Welcome. Seeing lots of different locations and folks here. So hello, Moscow. Hello, Colombia. Hello, Utah.
Amazing. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started with our intros. Again, I'm Tim, Foundy's head of advertising and media. If you're new to one of these, we do these webinars once a month. At least we try to stay to that frequency, just talking about trends, news, insights in digital marketing and music digital marketing specifically. Little tips and tidbits that should help you be the best marketer that you can be for your music, get your music heard, reach new audiences, and all of that good stuff. We are joined today with Jeff Halliday. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Tim. I'm Jeff Halliday. I'm the VP of Marketing at Downtown Music, Artist and Label Services. We represent a really exciting roster of artists that we are lucky enough to get to release the music for, obviously distribute the music, but then also work on the marketing plans and do all sorts of other amazing things on the internet and digital spaces with our artists. And really excited to be here with all of you to talk about playlists, a particular area of interest and one of the areas that our marketing team definitely focuses a lot of their energy on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, I work pretty closely with Jeff. He is really, the lead guy for a lot of downtown's campaigns. New artists, established artists. When they're really we're really looking to make that impact with digital marketing and launch a new project or reach their fans. Jeff is the guy who really leads the charge. So yeah, really excited to have him on. And again, today's topic is all you need to know about playlists. This seems to be, how do I get on playlists? What playlisting tools are effective, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to be a question that's always asked in every single webinar. We get a ton of emails about it. So, I think this is our most anticipated webinar topic. At least it seems like that to me. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I have some questions for Jeff that I'm going to ask, but again, if there's anything specific that you want to learn about, please ask in the chat and we'll try to get to it. So yeah, to start things off, Jeff, this is kind of just a broad overarching question, but in 2023, how important is it for artists to get music onto playlists? Do playlists still have the same impact that they did 5 years ago? And can you tell us a little bit about the benefits of being placed on a playlist?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I will say there is still certainly a lot of validity and a strong use case and value to getting added to a playlist, editorial playlist that is, or user playlist for that matter. Um, the editorial playlisting ecosystem has certainly changed a lot and is evolving quickly. Some of you may have heard of, the algorithmic or algatorial playlists that exist. And then, of course, with the ever increasing amount of playlists, that means there might be more opportunities to discover your music, but some of the individual playlists themselves may have less engagement than they would have had a year, 6 months, even 3 months ago, because there's just this infinite choice now. And so the energy that a New Music Friday might have absorbed on a Friday like today, a year ago, is going to be absorbed by a lot more places and a lot more infinite sort of niched genre and mood playlists, because that's what people are searching for. And ultimately, search terms and what users are actually looking for is what drives these music companies to build. They know what people want because they're constantly optimizing their app to deliver playlists to them. So for you as an artist, it is really important to look at a playlist as just another one of those opportunities for your audience to engage. It's not the only way that artists can be found. And certainly over time, the strength of just getting on one editorial playlist, I think, is being balanced out by things like, the algorithm serving music up that's got a real fan engagement factor. In a lot of cases, we find that playlists can come along for a song in the wake of some of that fan engagement, because Spotify is doing a better job and Apple's doing a better job and YouTube's doing a better job of keeping their finger on the pulse of that type of stuff. So yeah, interesting times.
That's there's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, that's a great start to our session, Jeff. Yeah, there's one thing you said that I'm particularly curious about, which is the concept of official editorial playlists versus maybe some smaller third-party curated playlists, mood playlists, other playlists that are springing up that are curated by sort of non-official, non-editorial sources. I was going to ask you, I guess, can you just tell us a little bit about the value of these non-editorial, non-official playlists? It seems like, again, a few years ago, everybody was just clamoring to get onto New Music Friday, get onto the official, Spotify playlist, the official Apple Music playlists. Tell us a little bit more about the smaller niche playlist and the importance of them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think playlist placement, a lot of times it's about engagement, and growing a song from a playlist has a lot more to do with being on the right playlist than being on a big playlist. Because at the end of the day, whether it's a computer controlling the playlist or a human controlling a playlist, or a little bit of both in reality, when your song is successful in that playlist, the message is usually one of more inclusion. It's going to get more support. It's going to start to get served into more areas. So while you might look at a playlist like New Music Friday again and go, I want to be on there, 4 million followers, if your song is on New Music Friday getting skipped over and over because it doesn't fit the mass market, it's actually bad for you in some ways and can be bad for the data footprint of your song, and how important that is going forward is becoming more and more of like a present piece to the marketing equation that we're all looking at. Um, so ultimately, looking at playlists not just from like a volumetric standpoint, but from a targeting standpoint. How well targeted is that
Hmm.
playlist? Is your song like perfect for it? And therefore the audience that's there going to respond to it really well? That's going to send really strong indicators to the people you want seeing those indicators. And we certainly look at playlist positioning and the way we'd like to see songs move as a more like fluid ecosystem than what I think the typical idea is, which is just songs on every playlist all at once, which would certainly
Mhm.
be nice as well. But it's you kind of try and build towards that by getting the song into the right places first. Um, yeah.
That's super super valuable. I yeah, that's also something I'm particularly interested in, and I think that's something that people ask us about. This concept that there are these I don't want to call them like sort of hidden, but sort of black box like metrics that playlist curators are looking for or looking at when deciding to add stuff to playlists. What I'm curious about is what are those little signifiers in the data, those little things that like a Spotify or an Apple Music or even a third party playlist creator is looking for when deciding to add a song to other playlists, or deciding to give songs more editorial support.
Sure. So I know some of the things we focus on when we're talking about songs with those services are things like a save rate. How many saves per listener is this song seeing? And not just as a hard metric, not like, hey, we got 100,000 saves, but looking at it as more of a growth and acceleration metric. In Spotify and Spotify for Artists, even you can see what your saves are, on a graph. And when we see a song that's growing its engagement, let's say, the saves are really, really skyrocketing. Maybe the streams are too, but the saves themselves and the adds to user library, like the add to user playlists, are really, really exploding. Those are the metrics that really signify a deeper engagement with the song beyond just a stream. Because a stream sort of doesn't have as much weight, let's say, as some of the other actions that happen in the wake of a stream are like expressive of a user's intent to further engage with that artist. And so when you see someone saving, adding it to their playlists, that's going to ultimately provide some really strong data to an editor, or even one of the people on the label partnerships team at one of these services, to look into that song and see what's going on there. Um, so those are certainly important. And looking at obviously just daily streaming growth. If you're an artist who's seeing massive growth day on day on your streams, that in and of itself can certainly raise some flags. But then within that, you want to get some of that deeper data to understand like where's the stream growth coming from, and is it encouraging a lot of repeat listening. Like we see in Spotify, you guys probably as well through Spotify for Artists can see like streams per listener. How many times are people listening to it over and over? If you have a small audience, let's say a couple thousand people who are listening to a song over and over, you might want to look at marketing that song to more people, because the stickiness of that track, even though it's a relatively small sample size, you could really grow that and look at a song that's much larger and still seeing, even with 75% of that stream per listener rate, like a really successful track for you.
That's awesome. I think that's something that we've talked about on previous webinars as well. This concept that streams aren't exactly just pure, looking at just purely streams isn't indicative of how sticky a track
Right.
is, and how indicative of how much people actually engage with the track. Again, streams are something that A, can be gamed, and B, It's, someone may listen to it once and never come back to it, but it's those songs that people, listen to it, they love it, they add it to their libraries, they add it to all their
Right.
playlists, they listen to it over and over again. Those are the ones that, the playlist creators are like, okay, people really like this song, we should share it
Totally.
to a larger audience.
Agreed.
So that's really, really interesting. Yeah. And would you say that there's still, value in pre-save campaigns? Obviously, pre-save tools are something that a lot of the major sort of landing page, companies offer now, and it's something that we offer at Found.ee. So, is a strong pre-save campaign still a key part of the equation for playlisting?
I certainly think it can contribute to it. We know that like any sort of expression of early virality when shared, either through your Spotify for Artist pitch, through your distributor portal, like any way you can really, is certainly an impactful number. Like telling your DSP rep, this has 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 pre-saves, or vice versa, 15,000 creates on TikTok before it's out. I would say there's like sort of an analog on each service to that type of expression of interest. So like when fans lean into a song before it's out, that can look a lot of different ways. Pre-save is certainly one of the ones that is much more about data collection for the artist, and not
Mm-hmm.
so much about sharing, like on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, where it's more about like audience interaction. So I think when you can tie those things together, that's where pre-save is a really successful thing. And especially when you can lean in to your, obviously in this case, your found account, make sure that you're actually monitoring monitoring the pre-saves and maybe even re-engaging the folks that have pre-saved with a newsletter when the song is out, because it's so important also to make sure that you're not just putting a pre-save link up and expecting people to save it and do all of the rest of the interaction. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. No, I think that's a really good way to see, or to sort of, yeah, understand the value of a pre-save, right? It's more so than just trying to drive up that engagement rate, but also, using it as a tool beyond that to get people to come back to it. People that do add songs to their library, getting people to go back and listen to it on releases is just as valuable as those saves, maybe even more valuable. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's
It's
super
like
interesting.
you want to give people like sort of a reason to save it. And I feel like as a fan of music, when I pre-save something, it's usually when the artist is like tying some sort of content to it, or yeah, something that I really like. Um, so yeah.
That's awesome. I think that brings me to another question, which is, we've talked a bit about the sort of data indicators, to these editorial sources, of a song performing well. Uh, you know, these curators looking at, the sort of stream to engagement rate, the save rate, how sticky a song is. I was going to ask, beyond the sort of data within the streaming ecosystem, what are some other things that these playlist creators pay attention to? Something that we get asked about is, do playlist creators look at, your social media presence and
Totally.
social media engagement, stuff like that?
They do. And more we're asked actually to give, to when it's relevant, when it's a piece of the story, let's say, to give those handles and to kind of help illuminate what the narrative behind the campaign is going to be on those platforms, even, because I do believe that all of the DSPs now acknowledge that there's a lot of traffic coming from places like Instagram and TikTok and all the different discovery platforms where music, it can be heard first, and then obviously fans will quickly go and listen to it somewhere else. Um, it is not the top most important metric, but I think if you're an artist who is in that, is in a position to leverage a large social media audience, or you're going viral for whatever reason, certainly make sure that you're including that in your pitch as well, because we more and more over time see that artists with that early intent are starting to get playlist looks. Even smaller ones where they're testing the song into the ecosystem and seeing like, is this real? Are all these social media fans real fans? Is
Mm-hmm.
this song gonna work in our world? Some TikTok music is
Mm-hmm.
just for TikTok and truly is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. So yeah, having a bit of narrative, a bit of branding behind the song, it sounds like, and just, they like to see that people are actually engaged, like real people are actually engaging with it. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. We have a question from Joe. I think we're going to backtrack a little bit, to the point that you made earlier, Jeff, about, engaging folks that have pre-saved. So I think what Joe is asking is, once you get fans to pre-save, what are those sort of next steps that you can do, to, get people to re-engage, after they are pre-saved, after you have their data,
Sure.
as it relates to content and reach.
Yeah. I mean, I love the example Joe used here where they're going to do a live stream. This would certainly be a cool concept to expose to the fan base in the actual launch of the pre-save campaign and say to everyone, pre-save this. We're going to do a live stream for our fans the day of the release. And for all of you who pre-save, there's going to be like a special after party. We'll send you the link, something like that. Or some sort of unique merch code, something that gives people sort of another incentive to do the pre-save and join you for the live stream, and thus sort of makes it into a little bit more of a fan event through your social media than just click this button to pre-save my record. Um, I also think there are, you know, interesting ways to turn what you're doing on your social media into the pre-save. So if you're the type of artist who's, really, really in touch with your fan base and wants to give them some of the agency over how things look, you could say, hey, everybody, pre-save our track and send us an 8-second clip and we'll pick our favorite one to be the canvas on Spotify, or pre-save the track, sign up for our newsletter, and we're going to run a raffle and one of you gets like a free merch pack, or any sort of um, anything that you feel like really authentically can connect you to the fans and also obviously give you the advantage of them pre-saving your record. um, so yeah, giveaways always good. And then, not just physical giveaways, but also like, your time and energy, I think, as an artist with fans is really valuable to people. So going live, giving people insight into the record and giving folks something special to walk away with, even if it is digital, can make a big difference. Again, as a fan, I love when artists that I really like do stuff like that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful, Jeff. I think that touches on something that we've talked about in previous webinars, which is, I think giveaways and stuff are obviously really good for getting that sort of, quick, engagement, that sort of immediate engagement from fans, but letting people into the process of creation, letting them sort of, see behind the curtain, engaging in this process of like code creation, where you're asking fans, hey, show, give us some user generated content, which album cover should I use for this, like letting people, engage further, emotionally, seems to be a good way to sort of create that stickiness, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So that's
you could certainly take it to whole other levels with the amount of polling and things you can do on social media now. You could literally let your fans really help you pick, any amount of your own journey, let's say through the creative process, and include them in a lot more of it than was ever possible before. So that's a really good point, Tim.
awesome. Awesome. I think, just, while we're sort of on this topic, I wanted to ask about just any sort of other general strategies or best practices that you have, that users should follow, to sort of increase their chances of playlisting and editorial support. I know we've
Sure.
talked about pre-save, we've talked about, bringing people, into the fold and sort of creating that emotional connection, but yeah, and do you have any other sort of strategies or best practices, for users to follow when, they are trying to get onto these playlists?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you touched on like social media, and I will just sort of expand that to essentially like page health, your profiles, making sure that if an editor receives the pitch and someone wants to go look you up, that it's really easy to find out about you, that you've got your page claimed on Spotify and your bio and all those things are at least somewhat clearly laid out. Certainly helpful. And then lead time is one that I think a lot of our artists, and certainly artists across the entire map, I think with the speed of music, are struggling with, because music's just moving really fast. Virality can happen, you know, in an instant, and sometimes people really want that music available quickly. But the playlist ecosystem is certainly full of music, and increasingly more and more. There's just more music every day, and there's not necessarily an infinite amount of places to absorb all of that. So I think for any artist at any stage, not just an emerging artist, it's really, really good to get your pitch in the system, well ahead of time, 3 weeks out from your release at least, giving Spotify, Apple, all those folks the time to actually get ahead of things and maybe check the record out before it's available. Because once it's out
Mhm.
there, they're going to have a lot more data to make their decision based on, other than just the song and what you've added to the pitch. And things get really different. Um, it is much more conceivable early on to get artists who are smaller on some of these, like fresh finds and early playlists and things like that before the song is out. Once the song is out and it's performing in the market, and if it's not doing super well, it may give that playlister a little bit of a reason not to include it. And that's
Mhm.
just the reality, I think, of all of the DSPs at this point, is that they're looking for songs that are being like consumed by the market.
Right, right. I think you had you touched on a point there that I wanted to come back to, which is playlisting for sort of newer or unknown artists. Obviously, a lot of our foundry users are DIY artists. A
Yep.
lot of our foundry users are people who are marketing their own music. And if you take a look at a big playlist on Spotify, it seems like there's just mostly established names. So I know that you, Jeff, I know that you work with a lot of developing artists and a lot of sort of newer acts, newer projects. So I wanted to ask, when you're working with a sort of newer or more unknown artist on Spotify, or on playlisting in general, how do those strategies and tactics still apply? Is
Sure.
there anything that your more developing artists should focus on? Is generally, how possible is it for a newer developing artist to get onto some of these
They
playlists?
certainly still all apply, and I don't want to pretend that the most important factor in all of this isn't still the music. Like ultimately, the song, especially for an artist at the earliest phase when there are less, let's say, data-driven, um, reasons that a playlister might put a song into a playlist exist. It is very much about the song, and some of the obvious marketing drivers that you might have put together for that song. So if you're on a small label, if you're a DIY artist, what are you doing to drive consumption to the song? Like maybe, to some of the points earlier, what's already happening for the song, maybe on social media, that would tell you, hey, people are going to go be listening to this a lot. But there are plenty of playlists that are made specifically for, uh, let's say, emerging artists that are just getting their first few releases out into the world, and don't have a big back catalog, and so therefore haven't had the time or opportunity to like grow a big mature audience, like some of the artists who might one day be considered their colleagues or contemporaries. Everybody starts with 0 followers, right? So we've certainly worked with artists in the last few years that started there, like everybody else, and some of them have grown, exponentially, and then some have grown at slower rates than others. And I definitely think, by and large, the artists that keep a more consistent release schedule and um, stick with their content from the perspective of a lead time and a strategy throughout that sort of longer tail campaign, whether you're building up to an album or not, are the ones who will actually see themselves, let's say, grow through that ecosystem. So like maybe going from a Fresh Finds indie or a Fresh Finds R&B to maybe the main Fresh Finds playlist that's a little bit bigger, and then maybe into some of the um, genre-based playlists in your genre that would represent new music there, like a New Music Friday dance or a New Music Friday country. Um, and from there, obviously progressing further and further into other areas. Because generally, once you start to see some editorial looks as an artist,
Mm-hmm.
there's some name recognition there, and in their systems, obviously, there's a little bit of history. Um, Not every song is created equal, though, and I think as annoying as that can be for artists, I should also be hopefully comforting to know that just because your last song got a playlist doesn't mean this song is going to get a playlist, and that may disturb you if you're the one not being playlisted. But when you think about the grand ecosystem of artists, I would much rather live in a world where each song is being hopefully taken into account for its own sort of validity in that space than just playlisted because it's a big artist. We know
Right.
that still happens for huge artists all the time. The big Drakes and Adeles are always gonna be out there. But I definitely believe in a more democratic world for artists where DIY
Mm,
artists just have more and more opportunities for things like playlisting.
totally. Have you, I think, speaking of, have you, or does Downtown Music use the Spotify Discovery Mode tool much for newer artists?
Yeah, discovery mode can certainly be a really helpful tool, especially because it takes the burden of spending on a spending on a marketing advertising campaign, let's say, off of the artist in the front end, and essentially puts it on the back end through a royalty reduction. Um, the way that discovery mode helps an artist's music be discovered is by positioning the song in many, many more places that would exist in a non-interactive place within Spotify. So if you're a Spotify listener and you get to the end of a playlist, like what happens there? It keeps playing, but it starts playing music that's not on the playlist, but maybe related to the playlist through the algorithm, through some sort of um, through you, really, through your habits is how it starts to serve you music. And a song that's in discovery mode, you can sort of think of that song as being higher priority within that big cloud of music that could be presented to you. Um, the cool thing about discovery mode is as soon as you, as a user, interact with that song, it comes out of discovery mode. So,
Mm,
for an artist to look at that, we think of it like as long as your music is being interacted with in the program, in a way that's really healthy for the music and leading to more interaction and more repeat listens and more saves to library and all of those things, you're in a good place. If the song is not seeing any of those things happen, probably not a great candidate for discovery mode. And that certainly doesn't mean it's not a good song. It just means in that particular space, in that like lean back environment where people have sort of set it and forget it with their Spotify, it isn't hitting people the way that is going to pull them back in.
mhm.
And that's okay. Not every song does that. We've been really surprised by the songs that do in some cases. And that's just how new, I think, emerging things like discovery mode are going to be for a while because it's just it's all sort of being built as it's moving. Um, yeah,
Totally. Yeah, for those of you that are unfamiliar, I would definitely recommend checking out Discovery Mode. We can, I think, just do a quick Google search of it, but it is currently an opt-in program. And again, we've heard from Jeff as well as Jeremy, who was on our last webinar or maybe two webinars ago, that it seems to be helpful for a lot of newer developing artists. So
totally.
definitely you check that out. Yeah, it sounds like a good tool. Why not try it if you're really trying to get that exposure and increase your chances of editorial support.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Jeff, that sort of brings me to this sort of big question that we seem to be asked on all of our webinars, which is, outside of these sort of uh, uh, official playlisting tools like Spotify Discovery Mode. Are does Downtown use third party playlisting services? People always ask us, if these third party playlisting services actually work, and if they're worth investing in, and any of
Sure.
these sort of platforms that have popped up.
Yeah, interesting question. So I'm going to give you an interesting answer, which is yes and no. There are a lot of really shady third-party playlist things going on at the moment. And I think that it's only increased over the last few years because it's a value space where people can, go buy big playlists or create playlists and make them very big from an optics standpoint. They can get a lot of followers on a playlist, and then they can turn that playlist into a profit generating center by charging people to get on the playlist. And Spotify definitely doesn't love it. They hate it, actually, I think, mostly. And also the engagement, kind of back to one of those points we were all talking about earlier, like those playlists don't always have the best engagement. And so therefore the value, let's say, of a stream on one of those playlists, even though it might have 100,000 followers, is like no more value than you just running an ad for your song and getting a real actual engaged fan to listen that way. So that's the part that I think is very difficult to balance against what's really going on out there for third-party playlisting. There are certainly operators and like small agencies out there that I'll say maintain a more curated network of third-party playlist people, like human beings who actually curate playlists and are not just, I don't want to use bad terms, but like not just fraudsters who are trying to manipulate music and game the system and like essentially pull money out of music and out of people's pockets for nothing. But they're really, really difficult to find because the integrity of these playlisters, these third-party playlisters, is, I think, really protected by themselves and by the people who have access to them, because it's it's important to not keep those people's information private, because they have a really, really popular playlist, and the point of the playlist is not to abuse it and mess it up by sending them bad songs, and they wouldn't put them on there anyway. I still think if you're an artist that's looking at third-party playlist campaigns, you really want to look for reputable sources and try and do a little bit of research into the actual playlists, not just who's doing the playlist pitching for you, but if they can get you a target list or some of the examples of past campaigns so you can see some of those playlists, would certainly help you to figure out whether they're real or not. We certainly have seen a lot of data from Spotify that would suggest that by and large, the listening that's done on third-party playlists is done by the user that creates that playlist, which is kind of a interesting spin on the logic of third-party playlisting. But the positive spin I can give for you there is that means you just want to be on a lot of user-generated playlists. You'd much rather be on 100,000 user-generated playlists that are listened to by that user and only that user than one 100,000 follower user-generated playlist. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like the argument for creates versus views on TikTok. You can look at it like that a little bit.
Yeah, that's super helpful. No, I think like especially with playlisting, I think people kind of often try to look for this sort of silver bullet solution, like the one thing, the one tool that's going to get them the success that they're looking for. And it kind of sounds like, with this conversation, but also with just digital marketing as a whole, that sort of silver bullet doesn't really exist. It's a slow and methodical approach to your marketing, to your branding, to with digital marketing, it's pulling all the levers, and it's the sum of all the incremental gains that seem to make the difference, as opposed to just the one tool that's going to change everything. A lot of the times, those may
Exactly.
not work and maybe kind of scammy.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean getting you to the point where it can look like a silver bullet from outside too. So I think that gives folks the idea that, oh, it was this viral post that launched you. And that may be true in some senses. But kind of like you were just saying, all of the stuff that got you to that viral post those were all really, really intentful actions that were part of the marketing campaign as well. So if you grew your song to a point where it got a big a big artist retweeted you, or put you in socials, or one of these big meme pages suddenly started using your song in their content, and then it went viral from there, or any of the totally weird ways that music goes viral now. I think a lot of people would look at that from the outside and go like, look, you blew up because Dude Perfect used your song in a video. And it's like, well, where did Dude Perfect find it? They found it because we were doing marketing for 4 months before that.
Mm-hmm.
So it all sort of eats itself a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's all sort of interconnected, and you can't look at playlists and other sort of tools. You can't just look at them in a vacuum. They all
Right.
sort of play into each other, which is
Totally.
something that we sort of harp on at to our found users as well. I want to sort of shift gears a little bit to talk about, what happens once you get onto a playlist. So, say you use discovery mode and you get onto a playlist, or you're added to a smaller playlist or something. I have two questions here. The first is, once you get onto an editorial playlist, what can you do as a musician to sort of amplify, your addition to that playlist? And the second is, and we talked a little bit earlier about, getting onto one playlist, may not be the it may not guarantee that you'll get onto playlists in the future, but is there anything you can do to encourage a Spotify or an Apple Music to add your music to playlists in the future? So I guess, yeah, with going back to the first question,
Sure.
once you get onto the playlists, you get your first ad, you're super happy. What is that next step for taking that success and turning it into more success?
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, um, if you're pitching your song in Spotify for artists, like let's say your goal is, we've just we won our first playlist. Now we've gotten it, and now what is the editor going to be looking at and see, and how would they interpret the song's performance in the playlist? Am I understanding you correctly, Tim? Okay, that's great. That's actually one of the things we even look for too. You as an artist can certainly lean into that ad by posting it all over your social media and directing folks to the playlist, and obviously asking them to go listen to it, to save the song from the playlist, like any of that. If you're lucky enough to get added to one of the personalized playlists on Spotify, and you may have seen these, you'll get a link in your Spotify for Artists that actually gives you access to a version of the playlist that puts your song in the pole position, and you can throw that at all your fans and tell them, hey, go check this version of the playlist out. um, the driving point and mechanism behind all of that is, the more your song is interacted with on that playlist, the more that editor's job has been done, essentially. Like a successful playlist in Spotify ecosystem is one of 100% completion, where a
Mhm.
user is saving songs throughout the playlist, and not skipping songs throughout the playlist. And that means obviously that playlister has created a great, really engaged experience for the user, but also that the user is really happy. So the value exchange is like one of greatness, and we love music. So I would rather have it be that way, where really good music is being served and I'm not skipping. Um, when your song is in that playlist, its positioning in the playlist is obviously something you can look at as an artist and see like how the playlister might feel about the song. Is if it's really high, many, many, many more people are going to hear it. because most playlists have something like a 60, 40 even percent completion rate. Not the bulk of playlists out there don't have 100% completion rate, if I'm being honest with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You could all probably guess which playlists do have high completion rates if you just think about it, but it's the ones you would think. Um, and inside of that, people saving the song from that playlist, editors are certainly looking for those kind of things. If I have a playlist open and I'm the Spotify editor, like I can see which song was saved the most from that whole week from my playlist. I can see which song was skipped the most. So just like you can present good data in a playlist, you can also present data that might get your song deprioritized, moved down in the list, or moved out of the list. Um, and you can impact those again as an artist by, driving people to the playlist, giving people, your fans, a reason to go there. I don't necessarily recommend advertising playlists necessarily, because so much other content is in the playlist that you run the risk of not landing people in a place that has so much value for you. Um, but there's so many different ways you can tell people about your success, and if you're lucky enough to get on a playlist, and some of our artists are, they're certainly really excited about letting their fans know, and I hope you are too.
Totally. Yeah, that's super helpful. That was, yeah, that was my main question was, yeah, what can the user do,
Cool.
whether it's posting on social media or sharing the personalized version of their playlist that
Yep.
gets, moves their song up on the playlist, gets more streams and all
Totally.
that.
I also recommend pinning it in Spotify. Like, pinning in Spotify should not be understated. You can legit pin the whole playlist to your profile and put a little message there that's like, hey, look at us go. So yeah.
And I think just like on that topic, just the sort of follow-up question is, if you're trying to get your music added to future playlists, is the process similar to what you would do to get your to get that first playlist
For
ad?
sure.
Is
Yeah, and
yeah.
having a bit of history and sticking in like a, let's call it a genre area, as long as you're not an artist who's like really ebbing and flowing between a bunch of different genres, like you'll start to create a little bit of a, let's say, a flow there. So if you're an artist A, my favorite artist, um, who is just gotten their first like Fresh Finds dance or something like that, and you're like, great, like did a bunch of promotion for my record. I just did my first, late night set at Elsewhere or whatever, like ready to put my new single out in 4 weeks. You get it up through your distributor. In your pitch documentation, I would certainly call out, like, and I think Spotify actually asks for this in words in the Spotify for Artists portal, to tell them like where you may have been supported in the past, but also to make sure like what, Spotify has such a huge list of genres that you can select, and they're all um, getting more and more detailed and more specific. So if you're an artist who falls into, a really, really specific like drum and bass chill house thing, and those don't go together, but you've found a way to make them, and that's what your last song was, like, make sure that you're also positioning the song in front of the same folks. Sort of have to think about what the data that Spotify is collecting is for. When Spotify asks you to do the Spotify for Artist pitch, everything that's not words, all of the buttons, all of the boxes they have you click, map into a system for them, and it helps their editors find music. So if you're an artist who has an acoustic song, but you don't check that acoustic box, when Spotify is like doing a big overhaul of acoustic winter and looking for acoustic music, your song might just not pop up. So it's really important. I would never understate like sort of the metadata that's in those pitches as well.
Mm-hmm. That's super helpful. Thank you. We have a couple questions that I wanted to sort of put on the back burner until we sort of finished our main convo
Sure.
about listing. But that's all been super helpful. Thank you so much, Jeff. So yeah, David Salvador, thank you for your patience. So David asks, when engaging fans with BTS content, are there copyright concerns when sharing rough mixes, pre-release audio clips? what if they share it on YouTube and confuse content ID? Is that something that you're across, Jeff, usually?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And you certainly, I can tell you have a little bit of experience with this stuff. We see that there are more and more issues that can arise, let's say, from an early clip leaking or something happening on the internet with a piece of music that might have been fingerprinted by the YouTube's content ID system, or even in Shazam early. We've seen artists where they're sending us a message that's saying, "Hey, my song is being Shazammed, but it doesn't come out until 4 days from now." And we're going, "Okay, that means your song definitely, like, it's somewhere, it's in some bar being Shazammed." Uh, so what I'll say is this: there are a lot of there's a lot of great sort of connective tissue that exists in the YouTube content ID system and in these different thumbprinting and fingerprinting systems around audio that should give you comfort that if stuff leaks early, it'll still very likely be monetized back to you. And certainly it should feel great if your music is being used by fans early in their clips and they're sharing it early. Hopefully that's also an expression that they're like really, really into your music. They're about to go share it with a bunch of their friends and do all the things you really want your fans to do. So I also think it's like kind of about redirecting it. If you see stuff starting to go viral and you see clips starting to pick up steam, in some ways, the best thing you can do is repurpose them into your feed and use the official audio or put the pre-save clip up, or pre-save link up against that content, or reach out to that person who went viral with it and say, "Hey, put the pre-save link in your next post. Like, thanks for shouting me out." They're real people. A lot of times, like, this is just a super fan who's absolutely nuts about your music and wanted to share it, and they're not trying to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So how you lean into that or work with that person um, can help you. And then on the content ID side, you should feel a measure of sort of at least comfort knowing that, like, your audio is protected as long as you're with a good distributor. Everything should be monetized from the second it's delivered to YouTube content ID, even if it's leaked before release day.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a positive spin on things. Don't be freaked out
It happens
if
so
your stuff
much that we
leaks.
have to, like, we've had to reframe our thinking on it. And I think young artists have certainly come up in an ecosystem that's almost encouraging of leaks, because I don't know, here we are, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Like every Radiohead album that comes out, it's just fan versions, fan edits, leaks. For the entire year leading up to the actual release, they seem to love it.
They do, and I
Yeah, it's
have a
hilarious.
friend, this is like an old industry story, but I have a friend who was tasked by Capitol in like 2007 or whenever In Rainbows came out. His job was to leak it on what.cd before the record came out, to make sure that it was available on all the torrent platforms before anything. Because this was
Yeah,
the record that Radio had decided, like, you pay what you want, like, music is broken. Um,
that's
so
awesome.
yeah, good
That's a
times.
really cool story. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Next question from Salvador. Does it hurt for pitching? Does it hurt to essentially pitch? Does it hurt the pitching process for Spotify playlists? Multiple pitches or pitches done from multiple countries. Doesn't matter if the pitch is done from Mexico or from the U.S. from Spotify for artists. I don't know if you have much experience working with
We certainly
artists that are.
do. We have a lot of artists who blur the very blurry borders that already exist. All these lines that we've drawn don't exist in music, right? So I'll say that it does matter if the pitch is done from Mexico or the US. Just make sure you're pitching it in the territory and marking the territory that you feel is the most, has the audience that's resonating the most, and also the music is, like, for those editors the most. That can sometimes be really hard to determine if you're making really, like, maybe music that is right on that, like, crossover point. We certainly have music on Mexicana that is, like, created by young people who grew up here in LA, in San Diego, in Northern California, in Denver, never lived a minute of their entire life in Mexico, but are certainly heavily embraced by the Mexican audience. So, I think make a calculated decision for what your music represents and try and get it in front of the people you feel like will like it the most. And then you hopefully grow your project to the point where both of those territories are, happy to hear about it. We certainly have artists where we pitch it, from Mexico and see lots of US playlisting, and vice versa. Artists here in the US who see playlisting globally from a pitch here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great answer. One more from Simone. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, could being on too many third-party playlists hurt the algorithm on Spotify?
I don't really think, well, yes. Being on playlists where you're not being engaged with, I guess theoretically could hurt. If you're on like 100 third-party playlists and your song's being skipped on all of them, like that would probably send a signal to Spotify, and the many algorithms that serve music there would look at your song and might deprioritize it.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of have to think about what is happening to your song and how a computer might interpret it. As sad as that is, the reality we all live in is one of a computer assisted world. And so even if a playlister is the one ultimately making the playlist, how they sort music and how they get through this like massive list is certainly with some help from the bots.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, Jeff, we're running to the end of our time here. And I
Cool.
know you have a hard out at 12. So I just have one last question for you to sort of cap things off today, which is, we've been talking about playlists for the last hour. Are there any alternatives to playlists that you and the company are currently looking at that are really helpful for artist growth? Any sort of tools that you guys are paying attention to right now that could help outside of playlists? Any other places for users to focus their energy on if playlist isn't the sort of end all be all.
Yeah, I think look at what playlists are to you and sort of zoom out and think like, what is a playlist? A playlist is a point of discovery for fans. And for a while there, and maybe even still in some respects, it's the biggest one. But there are so many pieces to the pie discovery. So really like broaden your own, mental horizon around that and say like, well, people discover music on social media. So I need to really like be employing strategies there. The tools that exist within social media, obviously there's so many, but I certainly think, looking at ads, looking at some of the social media, boosting you can do of content is something that I think is really foreign to a lot of artists. But when you have content that's performing well organically, it sometimes does make the most sense to just make sure that that's being seen by way more people. Because if it performed organically well within this like little cluster, similar sort of in like a sad way to like a political message, you just have to pay to get that out. And if it tested well with this 5,000 people, think of what the possibilities for your music might be with the next 50, 500,000 people. And sometimes those budgets can be really hard to realize as an artist. So, doing it in really measured stages and testing things and being super intentional, I also think is hopefully how you approach your art. And I would say is exactly how you should approach your digital marketing. Not just expecting like overnight that the song is just going to like go viral in the ad and everything's going to just immediately work, but kind of the same way that you've done things so far. But also those tools are sometimes difficult to use, so doing all the learning you can in that meta, in the meta blueprint and the ad builder, Google Ads, learning, getting all those certifications, using tools like Found to do better targeting, to understand your fan, the metrics, all the data, who to target. And then some of the newer platforms out there like Symphony and Boost and all these AI platforms that can run those ads for you and do the targeting. so that you can just work on the creative because you're an artist who should work on creative. Yeah.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much. That was super helpful for myself, and I hope for all of you who have tuned in today. Yeah, thank you all of you, all of our attendees for joining us today. We had some really great questions. Apologies if we didn't get to your question. Feel free to send us an email and we'll try to pass them over to Jeff if he can take a sec. Again, yeah, thank you all so much. Happy Friday, and thanks again for joining us.
Cool. Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
marketing.
Cool. Take care, everyone. Thank you.